everyone, and welcome back to Redefined Radio. I'm your host, Dani Lyn, and I have an exceptional guest. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation and share this space. He and I met just off of a whim a couple of years ago through LinkedIn, actually. And I am proud to say that he has now become a friend and one of my biggest encouragers. So, our guest today is none other than Anthony P. Howard. He is a DEI champion, an HR transformation leader, and the founder and CEO of HR Certified. He works with professionals of all levels with a special focus on empowering underrepresented groups in corporate environments. A published member of the Forbes Coaches Council, Anthony elevates the HR profession through certification, coaching, and community building. And I'm going to plug him real quick. HR Certified helped me to get HR certified, so it's the real deal, all right? He has over 20 years
Woo.
of strategic HR experience in diverse global environments. Anthony has spearheaded large-scale initiatives such as developing global talent management programs and leading successful culture shifts through impactful DEI programs. His commitment to diversity and inclusion earned HR Certified the prestigious Best of America Small Business Award in the category of Best Campaign, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of the Year. So again, the real deal. Anthony's deep expertise includes co-leading the formation of corporate-wide employee resource groups and driving successful union avoidance initiatives. His work extends beyond internal focus, partnering with HR industry leaders on webinars, panel discussions, online courses, focusing on DEI best practices. He's passionate about small business advocacy. He serves as a leadership council member with the National Small Business Association, and he's a recognized leading voice in diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right. So I didn't even say everything that could be said about this man. It's a lot more. That's just a small introduction into who Anthony P. Howard is. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us. So before we really dive deep into all of the success of HR Certified, we have to start with the story, because here at Redefined Radio, we know that every pivot has a story. So we want to kind of dive into the beginnings of your journey and what led you into starting HR Certified and becoming the HR leader that you are today. So give us some general details about you. Where are you from? What set do you rep? What do you do? And how did you first get into human resources?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Chicago, South Side. I said it right, South, with F's in it. And I was raised by my grandmother. And growing up, I actually wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And it was from wanting to make a difference then, because I felt like, our school system could be a lot better.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of representation of people of color, men in particular. And and the way that I was raised, it was always centered around furthering and bettering yourself. I didn't realize it then, but kind of like the seeds of kind of continuous professional development, evolution started then, but through education. And I went to, you've seen what's the name? Stand By Me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, you know that school, Eastside High?
Yes.
That's
You went to Eastside High?
That's the type of school I went to. And when I tell people that I went to, Chicago public school, they're just like, no, you didn't. You went to a suburb. You went to school in the suburbs. You went to a Catholic school. I was like, no. And I think, again, my upbringing with my grandmother, you don't have to be your environment, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have other strong things and pillars to work on. And I even doubled down that I really wanted to make a difference as a teacher. So I got into school on a regular admission. All my peers went through second chance programs and all of that. I studied for my ACT. And I even got a full ride. I mean, I could have not have paid for school as long as I came back as a Chicago public school teacher. But once I finally got into it, I realized that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
The curriculum is rigorous, but it was more than that. It was being in the environment and realizing the limitations that you have as a teacher. You have to be an administrator and then go. I mean, it's a different role to actually make a difference.
Yeah.
And I was really demotivated with that. And so as a result of that, I dropped out. And when I tell you I dropped out bad. I dropped out. I had like a zero point 0.5 GPA when I
Oh,
was kicked out. That was bad because I didn't have direction at that point. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I'm now just there and free of what I thought was tyranny of being up with grandma, right? And then I came back and I said, I got to get my life in order. And so I tried applying and nobody wanted to hire, drop out. I didn't have any experience. And so I joined a organization by the name of Jobs for Youth in Chicago. It's very similar to like a Year Up
mhm.
today. And I already knew how to interview. They gave me a business suit. They taught me how to interview. They had connections. And I got my first corporate job as a file clerk. And that began my journey in corporate America. And also that point is also where my DEI experience came in, because if it was a program that was designed to give disadvantaged youth a shot, because I mean, just think about how Chicago is portrayed,
Right.
on the news and all the things. If I wasn't connected in, I have no idea where my life outcome would have been. Um, and I excelled, and through that, I fell into HR. Um, with my very first role, I was a benefits specialist, and that was through cutting my career track through customer service. And I had an affinity towards benefits. Like, who likes benefits? Who like employee benefits? I did, because one was my grandfather. He passed away when I was in seventh grade. I had a very good job working with the Postal Service. And he was one of those that, like, I'm a tough through my sickness, right? He had a whooping cough. I never forget that. And he wound up passing away. And he passed away because he didn't utilize his benefits. If he had utilized his benefits, he probably would have lasted a lot long. He died when he was 57 and I was in seventh grade. And so I had a fascination around, like, wow, he had all these benefits and didn't. And so I leaned in. And then also, I'm an analyst. Like, I love data. I love numbers. And so I really dived into being a benefits analyst. I mean, imagine me crunching numbers, spreadsheets, pivot tables, actuarial tables, all the things. And then somebody came to me and was like, Anthony, have you ever thought about working in like HR, like be a, generalist? And I was like, no one's ever, you know what? I don't think so. And so I tried, and everybody was like, you're a benefits guy. You're a
Mm.
benefits guy. And that was where the master of the pivot came in for me. And I knew that HR and whatever the additional flavors of it that existed was my new North Star.
All right. That's a very colorful history, but I think it really does speak to the power of the pivot and just being true to yourself and knowing, when a path is not for you. I know that earlier you talked about your grandmother, and you talk about your grandmother frequently when you tell your story about how you landed in HR, but also how you ended up being influenced to start your own thing. So, my question for you, including your grandmother, were there any other early influences or experience that shaped your desire to become a leader or an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the guiding force was that I knew that within the profession of HR, there was a higher level of contribution that I could make. And I didn't feel as though I could do that in a corporate setting. I felt like I was always underutilized for my gifts and my talent, and I had to downplay them just because it was the safe place to be. And then when I did have a voice, it was always misinterpreted. I spent a good chunk of my HR career trying to find a place that cultivated the skills that I had to bring to the table. And I thought that the way I showed up was the way that HR was, or it was supposed to be, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
But companies deploy HR how they want to, including things like weaponizing, HR departments to take the fall for decisions that are made by the business. Other is that, not seeing myself represented in it very much. with people of color and also men. It was just a lot of things, and and when I realized, I was just like, I wonder what my full capabilities would be with being untethered, and that's actually how I began HR certified as a gig. If it was one piece of advice that I would give myself, if I were to talk to my younger self, I made a TikTok about this. It would be to listen more and argue less. Listen more and
Mm,
argue less. And what I did was, instead of fighting the system or, all of the things, when I did my due diligence, I put that into into teaching others and best practice and those type of things. I can redirect that energy and not for it to be spent on or feel like it's wasted or get frustrated. Like, it allowed me to channel my gifts in other ways. I still was working full time,
right.
but it increased my resiliency. Really, it did, to navigating corporate spaces better, more effectively, up until my grandmother passed. Yep.
Right. I think that that is really important, what you noted about making yourself small. And I think that it's something that we, especially as people of color in the corporate setting, tend to do a lot. When you get used to being overlooked, you kind of start to put yourself in a shell, anyways, right? And your feelings are too much and your thoughts are too big, or, you're too aggressive in your approach. Um, and you found a very unique way to challenge it. Instead of shrinking yourself, you're like, well, I'm just gonna go this way then, and I can have the freedom when I'm doing my own thing to be as big or small or colorful or straight as I want to be. What do you tell
hmm
people who are currently in corporate right now, especially people that look like us, people of color or people in underrepresented groups, to help them to not make themselves small and kind of fall into that cycle of not fully operating in their gifts and their talents?
Yeah, I think the first thing I say is, realize what your gifts are. Um, because sometimes they can be misinterpreted. You can misinterpret them. So I'll give you an example. I thought I had a gift of continuous improvement, of professional development, but the reality is I'm a disruptor. And that's a different thing, right?
Yeah,
Continuous improvement is taking something that currently exists and making it better, versus being a disruptor is taking it and remixing it, right? Or taking something from the very beginning, that stuff, things that didn't exist. Understand your gifts and what they truly are at its untethered. What would you be uninhibited, right? With zero barriers. Understand what those gifts are. And then once you find the gifts, don't change you, change your environment, right? And I don't think I realized that, because as an HR person, you just deal with the hand that's given to you,
yeah,
right? Because again, you've already put yourself in a small spot. Just like, I should be blessed, I should be, thankful that I have this job, that I work for this company. And then of course bills and life be lifing, right?
right.
Um, but I think that if you want to operate at a higher vibration, you want to be able to have more of a fulfillment with what you do, especially as an HR person, understanding how to navigate in systems within systems is absolutely key, because it's already a system that you're working in corporate America.
Mm,
It's already another system that you're working in HR. And then it's another system that you are underrepresented within that. So it's a lot to really, really navigate through. And it requires that resiliency, that awareness, and be intentional about the spaces that you move to. So in that aspect of a pivot, that you want to ensure that you don't jump from the pot into the fire, and it requires a lot more due diligence than an interview can provide to you, because we all know an interview is song and dance, pomp and circumstance, all the things, but you really don't know until almost it's too late, because if you had known some of the stuff, it would have impacted your decision on whether or not you joined. You don't understand what type of environment really fuels that until you know your gifts,
yeah,
and be very intentional. You can love what you do, you can love the company, but if that manager, of the person who's responsible for advocating for you, is toxic to your soul and your being and the way that you show up, it's going to be detrimental. As in summary, understand your true gifts, understand what they are, and be intentional about that. Not only just a culture, but who's going to serve as your advocate in navigating this system within the system within the system.
Yeah. As you were transitioning and pivoting into HR from a completely, it has a lot of the same soft skills, but what seems to be a completely unrelated field, right, of teaching. What role did mentorship and advocacy play for you as you transitioned into human resources?
Yeah. Um, I never had a formal mentor. Um, I kind of adopted them and they didn't know it. If I was just like, I'm learning from you, right? And being curious around it. I do remember one advocate that I did have, a leader that I had when I first kicked off my true HR career. He was a VP of HR, and well, I had two VPs that advocated for me. They both were white men.
Mm,
I just have to be, and again, this is my experience. Um, and both saw my potential. Um, and I think they both would describe it as undisciplined potential. Like, we're just like, wow, but let me help you out. You're a little rough around the edges. But remember, I pivoted from an analyst position, and I'm
right,
from Chicago. Okay, all the
right.
things. So
South
there was a
side.
little
Okay.
finesse. You're right. There was a little finesse that had to go into that, and I think that really really helped me with navigating corporate culture. And I say that they were my advocates because they navigated spaces in which my name came up, in which they brought me up or they defended me. And they would give me insight to those conversations as lessons learned for me. And the next time that were to come up, I believe in kind of like informal mentorship, where when you can find it, just lean in, right? And nurture that. I mean, for me, it was like, I want to make sure that they look good, right? But at the same time, I'm I'm showing up at a higher capacity. So one of the things that I always say is that don't get comfy, right? People think that when you work hard that you automatically get a promotion. That's not what gets you a promotion. What gets you a promotion is working above the level of the value and the worth of the position that you're in. And I realized that as I go back and I take a look at all the jobs that I've had, I've always, how you calibrate, like I've always been calibrated below my capacity. So that I
Mm,
was always able to go above and beyond that. And then come back and say, you know what? I have never been given a promotion. I've always had to go and advocate for myself. And I would have that voice in the back of my head. I'm like, I'm about to get fired. But they about to let me go. But it's either was no, which didn't happen very often, or there was that I let them know. I put them on notice. Like, look, if you don't do something, I got options. I got choices. You see how I'm showing up.
right.
How we gonna help navigate that. But with the mentorship, you don't think that it has to be a contract that somebody has to sign in order to do that. Like, if you see people that are rooting for you, they are your mentor, right? And be curious about them as it relates to that. If it becomes formal, then so be it. But I found that at least in my experience, I never had a formal mentor, and my goal initially was to be a chief people officer of a Fortune 500 company,
Mm,
right? To have a non-traditional profile. That was my initial goal, because you got to have a goal. What's
yeah.
my goal? My vision. Okay, I need to be there so I can show up. That you don't need to follow that traditional profile to get to where you need to go. And then it wound up pivoting. So I'm still an executive.
Hmm.
It translated differently.
You're not
But yeah,
you are a chief executive officer. Okay.
that's it.
That's what it is.
I
Still
am.
an
Okay.
exec of your own.
That's it. And I hope you heard that. Like, you need people who gonna check you, boo. You
Hello.
need you need those
Hmm.
around you. Not the yes sir, yes ma'am, I agree with you. No, you need that healthy push.
Absolutely. So it's quite apparent that your lived experiences and your background have definitely influenced you in your transition, in your pivot. The South Side has influenced you for better or for worse.
Oh
But
yeah.
you've also
Oh,
had some very personal influences. So now I kind of want to segue into some of the challenges that you encountered as you were building HR Certified.
mm.
As I went through the certification course, which is now what was that, last year? It's been over a year
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Feels long. It in some instances it feels like it's a long time ago
Uh-huh.
because of our individual journeys.
Yeah.
At the same time,
It
it
was like
wasn't that long.
yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I can definitely say is that best practices thing, you really, really harp on that. And I think one of the common misconceptions that even I had coming into that experience, and I think a lot of people have, is that, oh, all HR does is hire and fire people, right? Not
An interview.
realizing exactly and interview people. But it wasn't until I was taking your certification course that I learned, like, no, actually, those, what we deem as those bad decisions, like when someone gets terminated and things of that nature, a lot of times it falls on the front line. These are managers that kind of throw the stone and hide their hands, and now HR ends up being the villain in the story when really they're just carrying out the business decisions of the business itself. Um,
Hmm.
so what I want to ask is, when you were building HR Certified based on the experience that you had had in HR, what were some of the common misconceptions that you kept at the forefront as you were building? What things did you hear from people that you were like, that's just not right? And I need to make sure people know that, like you said, HR ain't HR everywhere.
Yeah. Well, the first is understanding what HR is about, right? And m- the best practice around HR is that we're not here to tell you what you want to hear.
Hmm.
We're here to tell you what you need to hear, and that we consult with the business. We are not like we support whatever the strategy is, right? Like, um, I've seen it to where I've worked in organizations where HR is actually used as a weapon. Like the person who leads it is just like, hey, I'm the big dog in charge. I'm the one that tell you what to do. I'm the one, and that that is not the way truly to show up, because if you are an HR person, go into the system and look at your reports to tab, and who reports to you, right? Probably none of those people we're talking about, right?
Hmm.
And then also, um, to be more engaged with the business, because there was a time in which HR was everywhere and now it's nowhere. It's a toll-free number or some chat box or some internet. So as a result of that, we're lock, sync, and step with managers and only show up when critical things are happening, matters of impact. I think that there's an ability to show up even when times are good,
Yeah.
right? And then the other is kind of like this lockdown of information, right? Where for those that, especially for those that are underrepresented in this space, you don't know about it. So I think you began this segment with people think that we hire, fire, interview. Why is that? It is because there's a lockbox as it relates to what we truly do. No one talks about it. No one champions it loudly. There's not, even like we are the main ones to go on and volunteer. We are the ones that step up, when it comes down to corporate responsibility. But we don't rock HR. We
Yeah.
just rock the company, or will rock ourselves, but we don't rock the industry. But the one common thing that binds us all, regardless of what flavor that we show up in, is that we have a passion for people, and their outcomes. And we generally do care about that. It's just that they're in silos, right? It's disconnected energy. Imagine like that same passion, like I think about fraternities and sororities. You know how passionate they are, but the one thing they have is community. They show up
Yeah.
for each other. Imagine if HR was like that.
Hmm.
Imagine, like, let's say that, versus this only time we get together is for a chapter meeting or a conference or anything like that. And we see our brother or sister that's going through a transition, and we lean in hard to make sure that they get their next role, or we support them, or we mentor them. Man, how that would be, right?
Transformative, yeah.
Um, yeah, it'd be very, very transformative. And then showing up for our next generation, right? They are going to be the ones that are going to be leading this, and it and it's hard to see how that's going to look unless we hold the mirror up to ourselves. This is, our generation. It's multi-generational, multicultural as it relates to the workforce, and I think for companies to realize that HR is the prism to connecting the company to that workforce, to that client base. And the demographics of human resources doesn't look like that. And to look at the workforce from the lens of the majority in corporate HR, which is a middle-aged white woman, that's not it,
Yeah.
right? Everybody's lens is important. But I can't tell you how many times that my lived in experience, my diverse experience made a difference as it relates to the impact that whatever decision they're going to have on people that on a diverse group of individuals, right? Have many examples in which that would happen. And that's a missed opportunity. Is it really still truly the reflection of the executive team, right? And putting those individuals in there for maybe not for the purposes of what HR is there for, but to be barriers and protectors to them, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, all those things are there, and that is again from my experience of
That's that disruptor
observing.
again.
Right, I know it's just how if HR is really, especially with our workforce changing, I do truly do believe that having a diverse HR department allows that prism to be more accurate, more true, more surgical as it relates to truly unlocking the power of people in leadership within the corporate space.
I truly believe that HR should progress the business objectives, but advocate for the employees.
Yeah,
And I think that if you are a business that values diversity and equity and equality and inclusion, because those are all different things, that
all different
your corporate makeup should absolutely look and reflect more like your workforce.
things.
And you can be an ally as much as possible, but you can never share a lived experience of someone that that you're that different from. So you should definitely have people who understand that lived experience and can represent and advocate for them.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's like um, when we do advocate for employees in general, they don't know it,
Yeah.
right? We're advocating for them behind closed doors, right? I mean, I think of an example in which I supported a Black female at a site. I mean, when I tell you education, experience, and it was at a site that was represented by people that looked like her, and that site was vacated, and she stepped into an interim role,
Mm.
and I was in charge of HR and talent management at the time, and so I'm advocating for her behind closed doors. Like, what are you doing? Like, are you really wanting to see her to be successful? Or is this kind of like a placeholder thing? And regardless of what you say, does she know it? Right. And then I'm on her end talking to her as a business partner saying, hey, what conversations have you had about what you think this role is going to be about? What will you do if you don't get it? What will you do if you do get it? How are you asking for feedback? And then, regardless, are you getting your worth? Like, hey, you're stepping up. You're doing two roles at once. At the end of this, like, regardless of whether you get the role or not, do you feel whole as a result of this? Like, I'm, I'm, I'm handling both of these roles as it relates to it, and people don't know about that aspect, and I try to show up in a way of just like, look, yes, we are more than hire fire interview. That's where we're visible, that's where you see us. But if we're doing it right, you probably won't see us then, right? You'll see us when needed.
Yeah.
And for managers to partner with us better, right? Like, as you're going through things, not just the bad things, but the good things too. Like, I see great potential with this. How can I get this person promoted? Well, let's take the big picture into this, right? Do they even want to be promoted? And then as it relates to a performance issue, just like, look, everybody's not going to be on top of their game all the time. Life be lifing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Are there unique scenario situation that's going on? Because this is your top performer, remember? Or, hey, you remember how excited you was when you interviewed this person? What changed, right? And then regardless, like, what could we do better? Yeah, I'm gonna come back to you and be like, hey, what can we do better around this? And I'm the one that just like, hey, we need to do some. Well, after we do the checks and balances, you're going to be the one to do it. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
support but you're going to be the one to do it, not me, right? Because this is your decision. You hired this person, you trained this person, all the things, and now it's not working out. And then we can still be human when we do this,
Right.
right? Why are we gonna contest unemployment? Like, or why, like,
That's
is there something
crazy.
that we can give to them to do that? Can we help refer them to another role? Like, look, we gotta accept our 10%, 20%, whatever that percentage is, as it relates to this not working out.
Right.
People don't see that. And not all HR people step up in that way,
Hello.
right? Either.
Mm-hmm.
And they should.
Absolutely. So I know earlier you mentioned that HR Certified started out as a side gig, but eventually, as you currently sit, is your full-time bread and butter. This is your baby that you have birthed. What happened in your career that led to you should have known I was going to ask this question. What
Well,
happened in your career trajectory that led to you going from side gig to full-blown business owner?
yeah, yeah. So that scenario that I described to you was kind of like the icing on the cake for me. I just realized that there was a bigger thing to address, right? I'm working within the system of this particular company, but I'm just like, there's opportunity within the industry itself. Um, and I don't think that I even thought about how to have a higher degree of impact until I was going through a transformation myself, right? And that's when my grandmother, actually went to the hospital. So in that example that I had just shared with you, in the end, I was in a culture that they kind of knew who they wanted to put into the role, into
Mm-hmm.
the positions, and they wanted me to communicate that out loud. And if I didn't believe it, I'm not going to communicate. Like, you're not going to have me, you're not
Do
going
it.
to weaponize me
Exactly. Hmm. I'm
to
not
do
doing your dirty
this.
work.
I'm not. I'm not. And in this case, it was, the organization was owned by a conglomerate in Asia. And culturally, they show up different as it
Hmm.
relates to that. Do as I say, be blessed, and I'm not going to tell you directly, right? All the things, right? And where am I from? The South Side,
Hmm.
Chicago. I'm like, I address things kind of like head on. So I just knew that the writings on the wall. I knew I couldn't stand up to function, and be me. And that's one of the things that's a risk of working in HR, is that when it becomes in conflict to your morals and values, but not illegal, it's on you at that point. It's not on them. It's not on the company at that point, especially if you've done your due diligence to try to change it, rectify it, bring attention to it, and you still decide to stay there and act that up,
Yeah.
then it's on you.
Yeah.
Then it's on you. Um, and I chose not to. And so, in my transition, it was really interesting. The last day at that employer, so many employees came by and they gave me gifts, and they, oh my goodness, like they showered me. That was on a Friday. The very next day, my grandmother went to the hospital.
Mm.
The very next day, I never forget. It was in October. I never really got acclimated with the new employer because of the fact that it was also COVID,
Right.
during that time.
Hmm.
And she was in the hospital from October, and then she passed in January. That was a long time.
Yeah.
Where I had limited access to her, all the things. By the time her funeral happened in February, oh, I never forget how cold it was. You've seen Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
Winter's coming.
Winterfell.
Okay, that was it.
Y'all were in
That was that.
Winterfell.
I thought that they were gonna cancel the funeral, but they don't do that. But man, it was so cold. It was brutally cold. Um, I weighed probably like 80 something pounds
My
at
gosh.
that time. Like I have a picture of it. And I thought in my mind that I was fine. I mean, I had 3 or 4 interviews and I bummed them all. And when I actually reached back to some of the people who I interviewed with and I asked them, hey, can you provide me feedback? Because you gonna hire me, okay? I know this, okay? And they said, no, Anthony, it's just clear that you weren't there. Like it was, it we couldn't really get any substantive answers from you. It was clear that your mind was somewhere else. Now, my friends have been telling me that all this time, like, Anthony, are you okay? And this and that. But it took somebody that I wasn't personally connected to and for a system that I always leaned in on when something was wrong to tell me that I really recognized that I had some work to do. Um, and so it was from February all the way up into June or July. I will tell you that I was in the sunken place. I slept a good portion of the day. I only got up to use the bathroom and eat. I literally was lying down the majority of the time, and my dog was there the majority of the time. And then it was people like Nicole, who was my business partner, that kept coming and making sure that I was all right. Like
Yeah.
I didn't think about like taking my life. All I thought about was like I would be all right if I didn't wake up, and it
Relatable.
was yeah. I'll be okay. Like
Yeah.
and lucky enough, I didn't have any vices. Like I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, because I feel like if I had those, I would probably have leaned into them. I didn't. I had lost interest in the things that I was interested in. I was no longer naturally curious, and then I started slowly but surely getting back reconnected to things. And I had to be very intentional that if I were to enter this corporate game, that it had to be a diverse HR department.
Yeah.
As I was going through the depression, I was going through reconciliation of multiple things. The first one was all these representatives that I had. Like I really wasn't living my authentic self. I lived through work. My analogy is that I had outfits. I had an outfit when I was around my family. I had an outfit when I was around in my work. I had these different outfits. And the reality was that none of them really truly fit. And it had impact on my soul, seriously. And so my journey was finding out who I was, like as a person. Um, Knowing that I had to do that, I had to be able to work in a space that cultivated that. And that was very, very important to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then as I started, getting back into and understanding that's the pathway I needed, then blessings start to happen. Um, I had started just showing this picture, but I remember I don't know if you remember seeing this picture, but when I went outside to take out the garbage, there was a rainbow,
Mm.
and I felt like it was my grandmother's spirit, saying like, come on back, right? And when I tell you that the blessings that came from out of that, and I think you remember this, it was just like they kept coming and coming and coming. And one of them was the Forbes Coaches
Yeah.
Council. Like, I mean, it was a lot. It was just, I was like, God, can you slow down? Can you slow? And it all hit ahead for me when I went to Truist Bank to deposit some money into my business account, and before I got out the car, I broke down crying. I mean, literally, and I was parked at the entrance, right? I mean, uncontrollable, and I didn't understand why. And then my phone rang, and when my phone rang, it was my my best friends. They were on a conference call, Jamel and Will. And normally I wouldn't even answer the call, right? I'm like, I'm going through something, but
Yeah.
I was compelled to answer. And I was crying so hard. They were like, "Are you all right?" And I don't think I could tell them that I was at the bank. And they was like, "Are you getting robbed or something?" No, that's not what's happening. And then it came out. I said, I'm not I'm not deserving of all of this. I'm not understanding why am I getting all of this? It doesn't make sense. It does. I don't feel like I don't feel like I deserve it. And Will, my best friend, um, he comes from a pastoral background. He said, "Do you mind if I minister to you?" I was like, "Do something," because
Right.
I'm in a place. I'm in a place. I don't know what this is. And he goes, Anthony, he's like, all those years you've been toiling the soil all these years, and it took your grandmother's spirit to unlock those blessings, and you're receiving those blessings. And he said, and what you were fighting off was the Holy Spirit, and that's going to help you figure out what to do with that, to be in alignment to your soul. Wow. Now, I am not a religious person. Most people assume that I am. There's like, you in somebody's church. I'm like, okay, I'll give you that.
Like
Okay.
you be preaching a word. Okay.
Know what it is. Okay. But I am spiritually aligned. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said that it totally made sense. It totally made sense. And I was able to redirect that to a higher purpose.
Yes.
And that's the reason why you see her exemplified. I have her obituary here. I have her at her prime here. I really use that, knowing that it's because of her, of the blessings that I've been bestowed,
Mm-hmm.
that I handle those blessings, and I think of her. That keeps me grounded as
Yeah.
I'm navigating this aspect. So it's been a journey. It's not easy as it relates to it, but when it's moments like that, that you have to go back to when times get rough,
Yes.
to stay focused, and to stay the course. That's a journey. I don't think I've talked about bits and pieces of this journey, but this will be the first time in quite some time that I've kind of talked about the entire journey like this.
And I
So
think it's so important um, because, first of all, that was beautiful. And you always talk about and give honor to your grandmother, but it just gives a deeper level of connection and depth to the journey that brought you to where you are. And you're not off the road. This is just the beginning. But I think that people need to hear that because in this day and age, especially with social media being in play, you see things and it makes you feel like you're behind in life, right? You can only see the distance between where you are and where you ultimately want to be. And it feels overwhelming. And when you look at someone that has reached a certain level of success or, whatever you define as success, you feel like you can't relate to that person, right? Like they're up here and I'm all the way down here, but you don't see all of that in between. Like a book has a beginning and an end, but there are chapters before you reach the end that you have to read in order for the full story to make sense. And so many times people see your ending or what they think is an ending because we're constantly growing and developing, but they don't read the chapters in between. Um, and so I think that's a beautiful story, number one, because I truly believe just listening to that, I always heard that, I am the sum total of the answered prayers of my parents and my grandparents. When God makes a promise, it's never going to come back void. even if it's not you that carries it out, or even if you don't live to see it fulfilled, it will be fulfilled. And so I think that with your grandmother, that all of this is her answered prayers, that God still honors, even though she's not here physically, he still honored her prayers. So it took, sometimes also it takes us losing the things that we use as a crutch to hold us back in order for us to fully go headfirst into what we're supposed to be doing, what we're called to do. We see our flaws and our failures as the reason why we can't do something, when
Yeah.
God sees those as opportunities to use us. Because you can't use prideful people. If you feel like you know everything, ain't nothing that I could teach you, because clearly you know everything. You got your degree and you know everything.
The
But
degrees.
right. But when you realize that you're an imperfect person, or there's so much more for you to learn, you're teachable and you're coachable. And so you'll never stay stagnant, because you're always on a journey to be better, to be your best self. And I think that we look at those things as what limits us, when God sees it as things that can propel us. And so, you mentioned feeling like you weren't worthy of it, but God doesn't require that from us. He doesn't require that we see ourselves as worthy, because he's already deemed us as worthy. He just needs us to do what he already told us to do. Like, I've been told you
Mhm.
to do this. I gave you these gifts. I gave you these talents. You've been playing, wading in the water a little bit. Now I need you to dive head first into it. So I think it's just beautiful to not only hear some of the challenges and the struggles, but also everything that came from what really could have been a derailing moment. We talked about, and you mentioned earlier about how we need to figure out what our talents are and what our gifts are, and operate in them fully. And when you work in corporate, I feel like you almost can't have those things, right? If you work in
Yeah.
corporate long enough, you'll hit a
Mhm.
road, or a stage in the road where you'll be like, well, what am I good at? Like, what brings me joy? What gives me fulfillment? What am I passionate about? Because it's like you're a part of a machine and you're no longer really a person. And so I think it's important for people to hear that they can take a moment in time that may not have been so great and may not have felt so great, and really use that to catapult them into what is their passion, and finding out what those gifts are and really utilizing them to the fullest extent that they can.
No, that was one thing I just wanted to say here, was that, you know, that transformation was a recalibration of what my goal was. Because I think I told you, like, my initial goal was to be Fortune 500, chief people officer.
Yeah.
But I never went further than that. It was a title, right? It was a title, it was a status, it was all these things, right? And so the analogy I like to use is that, I was walking this path that's already been walked. I see clearly how to get there, but this path was obstructed. It was obstructed with thickets, like the thorns and all the things. And I was pushing through, but it was just like, thousand little cuts that
Yeah.
was going on. And when my grandmother died and I went through that, I fell off that path altogether. And when I came back to, in that analogy, when I, saw the rainbow and all this other kind of stuff, when I came back on the path, I saw a new path that I never paid attention to before. And that light was even brighter than where I was facing. But the only difference here was that there was no path. It was the destination and there was nothing.
Mm.
But I was creating that path. And then I went out on faith, and so that pathway to this new light, it was a path never taken, path never developed before. Because I mean, I used to go based off my social security statement. Did that number go up? Okay, I'm good. If it did, we got to do a reconstruction here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a falsity of entrepreneurship as a continuation of your journey. And it's not, it's a reset button.
Mm.
It's a reset button. No matter how good you think you are, it is you remember Nintendo, you hit the reset
Yep.
button. That's exactly what that is. Okay.
You got to blow up the
But
cartridge a little bit.
okay, put it in the refrigerator, whatever you need to do. Like, and look, and for those that don't know, you won't
Right.
know what we're talking about
We
here.
probably aging ourselves right now.
But it's a whole different path. And it took me a while to reconcile around that, about what success is but more importantly, on what and the alignment of it while walking the path,
Right.
right? Mm-hmm.
I think that is pivotal. It's really like a reawakening when you start to realize that I don't have to take the paths that are already paved. However, I feel like it's just as difficult when you see a bright light and you look down, because your whole life there's always been a path there. There's always, whether the path is smooth, whether it's rocky, if we're walking on cobblestones we might fall in a little in between. We have something there that will guide us. But when you look down and there's nothing there, it can be
Yes.
both exciting because now finally I can create something of my own, but it can also scare the living daylights out of you, especially if you've never had someone show you how to lay a path. Were there any points in time as you were building HR certified, especially when you decided to do it full time, where you weren't really sure about that next step and where does this next brick go in the path that I'm paving for myself now?
As I was building my own network and understanding what entrepreneurship is, and working that side of the brain, because it is a different side of the brain,
Yeah.
was understanding that money is not an enemy, that money is fuel.
Mhm. So I want you to say that again for the people that experience that fear of money and what do I do with it? And can I handle when these things come? I want you to say that again for them.
I mean, coming from HR, it's a selfless profession.
Hmm.
You undervalue yourself automatically because of this mindset that um you that money is dirty.
Mm,
That
yeah.
But really money is fuel for the mission and the purpose and the vision of what you do. And it took me a long time for me to really accept that, because that was also wrapped in um imposter syndrome and
Mm,
all of the things, and not being able to get what my worth was. It was a rewire for me. Um, and I'm telling you that these were from my coaches and all of that. That rewiring, it took some time.
yeah.
And I had to learn it in my own way. That you're not everyone's assignment.
Mm,
You can't help everybody, right? In order to be successful, you have to have a focus, right? It can't be, it can't be everybody. And so I found out over time that the better my niche was, knowing who I'm here to serve,
yeah.
um, that really allowed me to even be that much more impactful. And it's still not about you, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you do have a form of ego around yourself, because I mean, you wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you didn't know something about a
Right.
little something,
Exactly.
okay? But in the end, it's still not about you,
Yeah.
right? You limit yourself if it is, right? You can't force feed people to want something. They have to want it because they want it, right? And then how do you show up? It has to have some kind of experience around it, some transformative nature
Right.
around it, right? So how do you do that? And that you only can grow so much if it's only you, right? So you got to have people that are champions of it, that will help. And when I tell you, between my friends, family, those that I've encountered in my professional life, you're an example of that. It's fuel to constantly evolve and not to get comfy, as it relates to that, and to know that entrepreneurship is a whole new learning journey. You are a baby, you are a newborn baby
Mm-hmm.
again, and you got to learn it all over. It takes money to make money.
Mm, mm-hmm.
You got to have money to make money. That point blank period, right? um, HR as an industry is one that you do show up in a certain kind of way. Like I can't be looking crazy, right? I can't, my stuff got to be tight.
Yeah.
You got to, it takes money, it takes resources to do that, right? And then when it comes down to making money, like, especially when it comes down to corporate stuff, like, you may not get that stuff right away. You might have to put an investment into something, and then you got
And
to
then you
wait.
see it later. Yeah.
Right, and you see it later, right? And then you still in the back burner because you're the little guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then just not forgetting about you,
Yeah.
right? And that whole aspect, and being able to nurture, yourself and your development, your spiritual journey, physiology, your whole overall well-being, that you don't lose that behind. And your circle will change.
Yeah.
Uh, your people, your close ones, that will shift, as it relates to that. And it's very important that when you are in this, that you can't have people that are not aligned to where you're looking to go.
Absolutely.
And
They'll
you
sink
might
you.
have to leave some people. Yeah, you
They'll
might have to
sink
leave
you.
some
Yeah.
people behind. Mhm.
Absolutely. I think too in our community, because we don't see it happen often, even the people closest to us can project their fears onto us because they've
Mhm.
never seen it, or they wouldn't be as courageous to do it this way. And a lot of times they're well intentioned, but yeah, I think it's extremely important that when you're on this road, you share certain things, but you hold true to that vision. And sometimes it's best to kind of keep it close to the chest, because
Yeah.
people can ruin it, especially when you're doing it on your own. And we mentioned imposter syndrome and some of that self-doubt. You're already thinking these things. I don't need nobody else to come and tell me what I'm already thinking and playing out of my mind, and I'm actively fighting against those thoughts every day to make this happen. So
Hmm.
that circle
Well, I
change is
mean,
real.
even like, I know I can work wonders in the corporate space. You
Hmm.
throw me in there, as long as the culture and I don't have any worries. But when I was here on my own, I had to reprove myself to me again.
Mm.
That's the reason why I had to get the award. I had to pressure test it to make sure, to validate to me that I can navigate this industry and this space, um, as HR certified, and
Right.
not as an employee of something, right? So that was a journey. I have nothing to prove now. Okay, that part is over.
Check
That
his
part is over.
resume. Check his resume.
Yeah,
Okay.
y'all heard her at the beginning
Well,
introduce me.
and like I said, I was trying to run through it. It was so much. Child. He ain't new to
But
this.
it's
He
a
true to this. What were some of the strategies that you used to overcome, some of that self doubt, that imposter syndrome? Because you face imposter syndrome on two ends, right? So you come from the corporate space where you're working for someone else, and you are underrepresented as a male in HR and also as a black male, right? So it's a double whammy. And so oftentimes imposter syndrome can show in those spaces too, where it's like, well, I don't see myself, and everyone else at the table is saying this, but I got a different feeling. Is it me? Am I the drama? And then you come out of that into entrepreneurship, where you're building something for yourself. And once again, you're building a path that's not there towards an end goal. So you have imposter syndrome in that way. Do I really know what I think I know? Can I navigate this space? Can I build something that is successful? What were some of the strategies and coping mechanisms that you use to keep yourself grounded and get over some of that imposter syndrome and that self doubt?
Yeah. Well, but the first one was, putting structure around the business, itself, vision, mission, values,
Mm,
right? And staying true to that. So, because there's a lot of shiny things that can
yes.
distract you, from it. When I tell you, I had so many tools and resources and things and service providers and all this kind of stuff, that, I mean, you can sink yourself based off just all of that. So you got to have a direction that that you're steering your business to, and stay true to it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have responded to service providers saying, "Hey, this is not within budget, or this is not in alignment. That doesn't work for me." All the things. If I can get $1 for every single time somebody had reached out as it relates to that, I'll be rich, right? Um, so so that part kept me grounded, and then two, knowing that a I am a numbers guy. I've
Mhm.
always been, based off even then. Numbers don't lie, right? So, surveys, doing post checks, doing things like the getting awards, like those are things that reaffirms by hearing, that's like I've turned that to my performance review, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just like, how well am I doing out there,
Yeah.
right? The other is, having people that I aspire to be, and asking for feedback, right? Being and accepting feedback as a gift, right? And knowing I'm gonna have my own way of being able to get there, but being open to that. And again, as an entrepreneur, you do have a little ego. You got to put that on the side, especially when you know the intention is good. And then the other is, back to that holistic well-being, right? I have a therapist, and then, sometimes my friends, I ask for permission, hey, you mind if I share this with you? Because you want to make sure they're okay too.
Yeah.
You don't want to dump, because my experience is a little different, right? And all the things. Having that support system has helped me. And I guess then the other is not really defining success based off a number, right? Even though you need to have it, that it's your goal is to do this, and more importantly, why, right? Like there's a lot of times you set quantifiable goals and you don't say, well, why is that the goal,
Right.
right? So what's the why behind that, and using that to propel to get there. I have a theme for the year, and my theme this year is empower the others, ETO.
Mm.
So I haven't been as up. I have, like last year, I was all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Presenting, traveling, and all this kind of stuff. But this year was more of how can I help others that have helped me, right? So that has been an aspect too of keeping me like, what, there's a path that I'm I am leading. So that's the reason why I'm just like, yes, send me the link. Yes, I did. It's good to be a passenger for a change. And so to see you do this is an alignment with that aspect. And you and I are like that, where things are happening independently. Haven't even talked to each other about it.
Mhm.
And then it's like,
Yeah,
oh, you
everything
too?
takes
Okay.
time.
But it's things like that, and trusting the process,
Yes.
right? Um, I say that there is your plan, God's plan, and then your adjustment to God's plan.
Hello.
That's it. That's
This ain't
it.
no your plan no more.
It's not your plan. There's a reason when things don't work out. When you stuck at that red light, he's like, "Dang it, there's a reason." Okay,
Yes.
there's a reason. You may not understand it, but there's a reason and purpose for things happening. And understand your value and your worth. So Malachi, I remember us meeting because we're business partners on another venture.
Mhm.
When we went outside, and he was like, "What kind of car you want?" And I was like, "I'm fine with the car I got right now." He's like, "No, you're not getting it. What kind of car do you want?"
Mhm.
I looked at my car and I said, "Well, I can get an updated version that I got." He's like, "No, you're still not getting it. What kind of car do you want?" So then I was like, "Oh, I see where we're going here." His thing is you got to visualize it. You got to
Mhm.
manifest it, right? Otherwise, it won't happen. It took 4 visits, like literally, because he still kept asking me that. I'm like, I'm fine with this.
Pastor, what's pastor?
With this car right here. Why you keep asking me this? But it was that, you gotta envision where you are, right? Like, and that manifestation does help. Like there is power in words.
Yes, absolutely.
And we already know that your phone is listening to you and manifesting it in those feeds. So why don't you do it why don't
Right.
you do that in the real world,
Right.
right? And it does happen. So I think I went over all of the things that I realized that without them, they were impeding my ability to accomplish
Mhm.
everything that I just talked about. And so in this Empower the Other season, I'm able to go back and reflect on it, that and those pieces did not come all at once. They came over time, to be able to put these guideposts in
Right.
place for me to continue along the way. And the battle still continues,
Mhm.
but I'm able to navigate it better, if that makes sense. Like
Yes.
I know storms will come. That's number one. And being prepared to be able to navigate it and sail through it. I will tell you that there was a brief time this year where I thought I was going to have to enter corporate America again. Like,
Mhm.
and I was looking, I started to almost click the link, and then I changed my mindset, and then blessings started to flow again. It was almost like it was a test.
Yeah.
Like, do that if you want to. Let's see how real you really are with this. And then businesses started to flow. I was able to think differently about the way I handle HR certified. It allowed the space for me not to make a rash decision. And please, like, before you make any decision, I know for me, just especially as it relates to business, either write it out or go to sleep and then come back to it. Because you just don't want, you don't want to make a decision that you can wind up
Regretting.
regretting. And I think in the moment, sometimes a little thing connected to a lot of other little things will become a big thing. It feels like it's insurmountable, but sometimes it takes that pause and that rest or that type of release, and however way you show up, to be able to break it down to its smaller parts,
Yeah.
and then get back to it. And then the things that have come as a result of that additional growth help prepare you to go to that next level, because you got to go through challenges and everything to prepare.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be, I'm not ready for a big government contract right now. I would sink, right? There are capabilities and things that I need to put in place and experiences that I need in order to get ready for something like that. These experiences are preparing you for the next level, and the next level, and next level, and next level. You just don't sit where you are
Right.
too long. It needs to be growth,
Mhm.
right? Regardless how incremental, and celebrate those little wins.
I told y'all he was gonna be dropping gems. I mean,
Woo!
insight. Okay. Insight. What I love about the mission, and especially your story, is that from the HR perspective, you are not someone who went to school for HR and went and got a bachelor's and went and got a master's. Like, you came from left field. So I love the idea of advancing and advocating for people who have non-traditional backgrounds. But in reality, in the marketplace right now, the job market is trash. Okay. They want all these years of experience. They want you to go get all these degrees, and the people at the top don't even have the certification that you are paying money to go get certified for. So the reality is that while we have HR certified that's advocating for non-traditional individuals to come into HR, the HR market is still kind of very much like, if you're not repping our set, we're not looking for you. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the pieces of advice that you would give someone who is coming from a non-traditional background and how to pivot into HR?
Your net your network is your net worth, right? Whenever HR job is posted, like within 40 minutes, it's like for over 500 applicants. Well, I think they lowered the barrier to 100 applicants, right? That's
Jesus,
on LinkedIn.
yes.
It's truly about how you show up. In these spaces before opportunity even presents
Mm.
themselves. You go where the opportunity exists and network and naturally inquire, right? And build those relationships. I had a client the other day told me, and I thought it was an awesome idea, is that, versus you just attending a webinar, go to that webinar, capture those names and be like, hey, I was in the webinar with you about this.
Mhm.
I'd love to learn more about you. Like, I mean, it's stuff like that, that will keep you in the loop. And there are some social Facebook chat groups that are also good, because they'll post positions. Be targeted as it relates to, like, don't just apply just to apply because the opportunities are there. Be very specific. I think I had referenced earlier about being intentional about your manager and the culture and the company that you work for. Get that short list out there
Right.
and start connecting in with those people, and go to their industry events, because remember, we're not just HR, we're the business. So show
Exactly.
up for the industry that you're in. And when you do apply, if it's targeted, you can customize that cover letter, right? I don't recommend that if you're in middle career transitioning and you're in survival mode, Like cover letter could be pointless. Look, when I go into, I'm name dropping. When I see Workday, I'm like, oh,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I'm like, you
It
want me to put
is.
all that information in there,
Exactly.
and I'm not going to even get a response? Are you serious? Unless I really am targeting being with you, I'm not filling all that stuff out. But yeah, network is your net worth. You're gonna have to figure out a way to get yourself above that, and then through the network, earn a referral from somebody who works there, to get up and above the fray. That is truly the way right now, because this market is not. It's an employer market right
Hmm.
now. Um, there are a lot of people who are currently working who are secretly looking.
Yes.
Right now, they have all these ideal profiles that they can really do in their mind a plug and play. They're not going to give that extended that opportunity unless you stand out in some kind of way, shape, or form. They know you. They know somebody that knows you. You've seen them out. Those type of things. The apply and pray approach
The same way.
at this point
Hmm.
is dead.
Yeah, for someone who is pivoting or transitioning in life, period, whether it's, they're transitioning later on in life, maybe they feel like their dreams have been deferred and my time has passed, but there's still a tugging there, or someone who maybe has kind of been drowning in the corporate space and is now kind of finding that creativity again and realizing that my dreams and my talents and my life mission is bigger than where I'm sitting currently. What advice do you have for them on what their transition or their pivot maybe will look like, what they should be prepared for, and kind of nuggets that they should keep with them during that transition?
Well, once acknowledging that this is not going to be where you're going to be, then use it as a tool where you are to get to where you need to be. Redeploy your energy. So I find that a lot of times people who are at that point are already at burnout
Yes.
at their current place. So how do you reestablish your boundaries? And it's not a instant thing, right? It's over time, right? Incremental over time, resetting it to where those things that were expected for you to burn out are no longer the norm, if that makes sense. If you have that ability to do that, that's number one. Get your financial house in order, all the things. I think that's number two, because sometimes it might get to a point where you're just like, peace, but don't do that if your savings account is zero,
Hmm.
okay? Because it's going to add more stress to you, right? And then third, try to, in indirect way, start to get a feel for what your ideal would look like. So I know for me, I mean, this wasn't a plan at the time, but now I go back in reflection. I'm glad it did happen, that I was able to turn into a gig, do it part time, get your exposure out there, start nurturing what this future state is going to look like, but just not at a 200-degree level, like
Right.
from a 10, 15, 20%, like you putting your big toe in it, so to speak. And where necessary, disclose to your current employer, because if there's you don't want to do nothing that's
Right.
going to still put
Conflict.
that primary tool
Hmm.
at risk. Now you got new goals, right? You have a direction that you're headed, and now you know that this environment that you're in right now is not, I mean, it's now not the end, but a means to where you need to go. If I were to go back and take a look at it, I thought I was ready, to take the dive at the time. But I don't think there's, just like with those that have kids, right? It was like,
Hmm.
when is a good time to have
Right.
kids? Okay.
It's
Like,
never a
who,
perfect
who,
time.
who plans that? Who plans for that? It just happened and you just deal with it, right? But where you can, you will,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's the practical advice that I have for you, and to never give up on that. It's there for a reason. It's implanted in your mind, your thought, and your soul, for a reason, to never negate it, and to nurture those things that allow you to still tap into that further. You had mentioned earlier, you got to have the right people. You can't tell
Yeah.
everybody that. Nobody at work, okay? Nobody at work.
Hmm.
Nobody at work, okay?
So we've shared a lot of time and space together, and I truly do appreciate everything that you've shared and all the wisdom that you've given. My final question for you is in regards to the legacy that you want to leave behind. What
Mm,
impact do you hope to leave on the HR industry and the clients that you serve through HR Certified?
yeah. The goal is to create inclusive environments where people can do their best and show up better, not only for the company, but for themselves, and by doing that, for their family, right? Um, the corporate space isn't going anywhere. And there are those of us, a good chunk of us are going to spend a good chunk of our lives there. So the impact that I just want to be able to see is multifaceted. The first one is um, opportunities for those that are gifted in this space to be given a shot, for work environments to be able to unlock the true power of human resources, to create in those environments that they put on their poster, on their wall, on their website, that they incorporate into trying to bring in top talent. And then the last but not least is for holistic approach towards making sure that we're okay, right? That we're navigating this space where holistic well-being is centerfold to what we do, and that balance to whether it will reduce the chances of burnout, of being stressed out, of not being in alignment to our purpose. Our next generation right now is demanding it,
Yeah.
and there's a mismatch with it. And if it don't happen quickly, they're going to wind up doing their own thing. But I believe through all of that there's a higher quality of life to be obtained through this. If HR people are more equipped to do their role, and they're passionate behind what they do, and they're supportive of it, they ultimately will improve the quality of life for those that they impact as well. It's not about you. It's about the impact that we have while centering ourselves in the middle of all of that. I want HR to be HR everywhere. That's what I want.
Well,
That's what I want.
you are well on your way. Just so the listeners understand, like I said in the beginning, we found each other on LinkedIn a couple of years ago, and for me personally, the impact that you've had on my life has been kind of opening my eyes to the possibilities of what can be, but also seeing things in me that I didn't even really necessarily see in myself. When I came to HR certified, I was like, I'm trying to figure out what this thing is about. Can I really do this? I didn't really believe that I could. And a lot of circumstances, even since getting certified, have still made me doubt whether or not this is something that I can do. But one thing that I feel like I gained from the experience, but also knowing you personally, is that once again, you don't have to take the paths that are paved. You can pave your own path, and to be confident in the abilities and skills and talents that you bring to the table. And if they don't give you a space at the table, then damn it, you make your own table and sit at
That's
it.
it.
And then you get to
That's
select who sits at the table and eats with you too. So from that
yeah.
perspective, I think that you are absolutely fulfilling the legacy and living the legacy that you want to leave behind. So Anthony, I thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being transparent. And I really do think that the listeners are going to take so many things away. And I hope that this is an episode that empowers everyone to dare to see the world differently and dare to bet on yourself, you know. So before we leave, I want to make sure you have the opportunity to plug yourself. Where can the people find you? Actually, let me plug this real quick for our
That looks like
YouTubers, right? This is HR certified swag. HR looks like me. Sorry, y'all, I'm gonna put it down a little bit. This is a sweatshirt, right? What I also love about HR certified is that you have a scholarship program that enables those that might be dealing with financial constraints around getting their HR certification to be able to do so. Because we said it before, you gotta spend money to make money, right? So for a lot of people, maybe this is the way that they break into HR. Maybe they've been working in HR for quite some time and they're looking to get promoted, but they've shifted the goalposts a little bit. And now you need to get that certification. And in this day and age and in this economy, when eggs cost $6 a dozen, all right, sometimes it's
Yeah.
tough to put down the money that is required to get that certification. So one thing that HR Certified provides is scholarships for either undergraduate students who are looking to break into HR, those already in it and looking to get their certification, the ability to do so by eliminating some of the financial constraints around it. And this is a part of that initiative. So the swag, as y'all can see, I love this thing. It's starting to get cold in Atlanta, so I can wear it all the time now. A certain amount of the proceeds from this swag goes towards funding those scholarships. So, Anthony, I want to give you the opportunity to plug yourself. Where can the people find you? Where can they get the HR certified swag as well? And what do you have going on that maybe you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, aligned to our vision is to increase representation in this space. The reason why that is important so that, again, organizations can have the right prism to meet employees where they are. And there's a lot of barriers to that, as barriers of information, finance, resources, mentorship, and HR Certified plugs that gap to the extent that it can. And so there's a couple flavors. If you are looking to enter and grow into HR after you have affirmed that this is the space, because HR is not for everybody. Oh, I'm good at customer service. It got to be a little deeper than that for you to come on this side, okay? And it's also the reason why, I mean, you'll be vetted because you're going to have access to personal information, situations,
Right.
privy to things that you can't be posting online,
Mm-hmm.
all the things. And so if you've passed that, or you know what, even if you just want to have a conversation, definitely, because I will help you out as it relates to that. But you have to distinguish yourself. And what better way to do that than to earn certification? There's one thing to have a business degree and you're saying that you can do those things, but it is a higher level of commitment with that. And this is the reality. As an entry level HR person with the certification, that you distinguish yourself even more
Right.
because not that many entry level have a certification, right? You can reach out to us on our website at gethrcertified.com. We're on all the platforms, but the one that we're most active on is Instagram and LinkedIn. And for those of you who are non-HR, right, you're just in here to be nosy, eat popcorn, all the things, that you can still support us or support your favorite HR professional with the swag for you and your team. And for those of you who are currently in it, you don't want to give a barrier for you to be able to get to your next level, your
Right.
step. And it's not just about earning the certification. It's about being able to use it in a way so you could become one of the most agile HR professionals out there. One major mistake that I see HR people do is that they take the certification process like the ACT, like a college entrance exam. That's not what this is. You shouldn't do it for that. You decrease the value when you just push through, cram, and pass versus taking it for what it is, which is a learning journey. Because guess what? You don't want to be a one-trick pony when it comes down to companies and things changing. Recruitment is hot maybe at one point, but now it's training development. Remember when training development wasn't a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a thing, right? Being able to be agile and have that experience in others and in an environment that's safe to fail, right? HR is unforgiving. A little thing can become a big thing, and a big thing can become a career-ending move, right? So it is about connections, coaching, community, and an environment for you to be able to thrive, for you to grow and come out distinguished. I remember when Danielle came, she's like, "Oh, I'm just going to do the PHR." I said, "Girl, what are you talking about? You are about to do that SPHR because of the level and experiences you come through it." Don't underestimate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? You will be pleasantly surprised about the experiences that you already know about this thing, but you just didn't know the terminology or the best practice around it, right? GetHRCertified.com. And I'm known on these streets as that HR guy. So I'm on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok as that.
And it's
You know, and
that.
I want
It's ethnic,
that.
DAT. Okay.
Okay. That means black.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'm a guy, black guy in HR.
Mm-hmm.
So that HR guy.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us. For everyone who is listening, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find Redefined Radio anywhere you can get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. But thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.